Yes, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another episode of the live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. Tell your friends to tell a friend that we are back officially, at least for the remainder of 2025. Of course, we were absent. Like I told you, that I will be taking a break from the daily routine during the course of the Christmas season or the festive season. I'm not saying it's the last, but at least we are back for now. I must say, it's not been easy being away. I thought about you guys a lot, but the schedule was really, really tired. I'm really, really exhausted. I don't think I've had the sufficient rest that I was hoping for, because there's been a lot of running up and down in the course of that period that while I was away. So, but anyways, life does continue. Of course, what did I miss? I did miss us match day two of the Africa Cup of Nations 2025. I did miss match day 18 of the Premier League, and every little piece of action that you thought or think might have been there. So I missed out on that. But like I said, we are back. So, unfortunately, I cannot react to what's happened during that period, because I missed it all. I could only catch the highlights for some of those games, and even as we speak, I've managed to watch some minutes from the game between South Africa, as they were beating up against Zimbabwe by 3 goals to 2 in the match day three of the Africa Cup of Nations. That game kicking off at 7 p.m. East African time, 3-2, while the game between Angola and Egypt finished in a goalless draw. That means Egypt advanced to the to the round of 16, as do South Africa, with 6 points in coming second in Group B. And to wrap things off, in the other group will be action in Group A coming at 10 p.m. East African time, when the hosts, Morocco, take on Zambia, while Comoros will be up against Mali. So that action is equally going to be underway today. But what brings us more than the Africa Cup of Nations is the Premier League match day 19 that does get underway. So we'll be looking at that as well, because action does kick off tomorrow with some of your favorite teams in action. Manchester United in action, Arsenal in action, and Chelsea in action, Newcastle in action, and all the others. While things will proceed. That's on Thursday, the 1st of Jan. Whoever designs the Premier League schedule ought to be investigated on whether they're not mental. I mean, much of it can be subjected to the software, but there's a human element to it that looks at the nature of derbies, the kind of security and logistics that are required to have certain games played on certain days at certain hours, and of course TV schedules do come into check. But with all that said, or with all that thought about, you can't help it but think that this is a crazy schedule. I mean, we have games tomorrow, which is Tuesday. I know during this period of the year, festive season or holidays time, a lot of people miss or are not sure what day of the week it is. But just for purposes of reminder, it's the Monday 29th of December 2025. As we move towards the end of the year, this is when the Premier League chooses to, sort of kick things a notch higher in terms of the frequency, or with which, or with how fast fixtures tend to come. I do not know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I, for one, I've always enjoyed these fixtures of the festive season, but also enjoying them with a lot of concern. Concern for the well-being of the players, the physical and mental, wellness of those players. I remember, I think it was Vincent Kompany, who is now the head coach at, Bayern Munich. We know that in the German Bundesliga, they get some, form of winter break, or, a Christmas break kind of thing. And he was speaking about that, and he said that's the difference between the German Bundesliga and the Premier League. And he said with the Premier League, it never stops. And indeed, it never stops, And he said there's a year where he only had 6 days off. You can imagine, only 6 days off, which means, isn't that absolutely crazy? It's not unique to footballers not to have days off or vacations off. And particularly that is very common with calendar years where you have the main season, whether it's Premier League, Spanish La Liga, or any other league, German Bundesliga, whatever it is that you're playing. But predominantly, we'll say the Premier League. And then you have the Euros in the summer or the World Cup in the summer. Usually that's when things get crazy, because as soon as you exit that competition, depending on how far you go, that sort of summer competition, then the season gets underway, literally. You're supposed to be reporting back for camp, for pre-season training. And, some clubs will afford you an extra week of rest. Others will afford you 2 weeks, depending on the sort of demands that the team have. And of course, your personal aspirations as an individual. So it gets crazy. And I think looking at the Premier League schedule, you can't help it reflect on the words of Vincent Kompany that he was, putting out there recently. So you have the Premier League, which just got played over on starting Friday, with the game between Manchester United, when they beat up against Newcastle by a goal to nil, and then you then quickly proceed into a midweek fixture where you have games to be played, excuse me, on Tuesday and on Thursday. I do not know why Wednesday was omitted, but whatever the reason is. And then after that, you have games over the weekend. And over the weekend, after those games, you have games in midweek the subsequent week. Because as we will see, for match day 20, you'll see fixtures come on Thursday. It's not very common that you get a Thursday fixture of the Premier League, but that's been the case. So the Premier League schedule in itself is absolutely crazy, is absolutely bonkers, as we will see how fixtures will be coming in quick succession. But that will be on the third, so you have fixtures coming on the 3rd and 4th. That's over the weekend. And then after that, that's for match day 20. And then for match day 21, you have fixtures coming on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So it gets absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. And then after that, as though that isn't enough, then you have a fixture over the weekend, which will be the FA Cup games. So it gets totally crazy. It does get totally crazy. But like I said, during our course of absence, Uganda Cranes shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw with Tanzania. Alan Okello missing a penalty in that one. Ekipezi scoring for Uganda to cancel out Tanzania's lead. We saw a host of changes from Paul Port, bringing in Dennis Masinde Onyango, bringing in players like Alan Okello and I think Travis Mutiaba. To start in that game, to sort of provide more depth for Uganda Cranes in the attacking sense of it. And yet still, we could not get the win that we thought we really, really badly needed if our chances of at least advancing to the round of 16 were to stay alive in as far as the AFCON 2025 is concerned. Uganda's final game will come subsequently. That will be tomorrow, Tuesday, at 7 p.m. East African time, when they meet Nigeria, who have already advanced the round of 16, having beaten up against Tunisia by 3-2 during my absence. Apologies, guys. I do have somebody calling in. It's an important call, so you'll excuse me, but allow me make this call quickly. It's not something that I want to do, but unfortunately, I have to do it because I do not know. Just give me a second. Bear with me. Bear with me on this one. Wanji sewo. Kale sewo naye gye bali. Era ebadde eganywa nnyo nakino tisinze kuba nagiteekamu emitwalo 10 ku Sande ng'ekomyewo naye natambulamu ennaku ndooza 2 oba 3 naye nzikiriza nkuddire mu ddakiika nga 40 mbadde nnyina kyemmaliriza. Apologies, my people, on that. There's something that I'm struggling with, that I'm trying to deal with. It's a very, very undesirable situation. So the person helping me fix that issue was the one reaching out. So unfortunately, I had to, take a pause and make that call. Only that it lasted longer than I had wanted it to be. But I just asked the person that I'll call them back after this so that we can discuss in broader strength about that. But anyways, like I was saying, it was a big disappointment on my part that we could not beat our, neighbors and rivals in Tanzania. That's the Taifa Stars there. But it is it is football. You win some, you lose some. It is a draw. Then now Uganda have a make or break tie in their game against Nigeria tomorrow at 7 p.m. As will Tanzania be up against Tunisia. Tunisia equally, whereas they are still second in Group in Group C. They are not yet over the line. They are not over the line because if they were to lose to Tanzania, then that means they finish third in the group and can only hope to advance as one of the third best finishers, depending on what the result will be between Uganda and Nigeria. But what is guaranteed is that, okay, not guaranteed, depending on the results between Nigeria and Uganda, I do not think anything other than a loss for Nigeria and a loss bigger than 2-0, or then that's the only way you'll have Nigeria maybe finishing second if Tunisia can beat up against Tanzania, which is a very huge possibility. So basically what Nigeria will be playing for in that game is sort of to cement their top spot in Group C. In other words, they can only need a point. A draw can work for them. A victory will be even better. But Uganda do not need anything other than a win for that game if they are to brighten their chances of advancing from the group stages, from the group stages of the AFCON 2025. So that is what's happening in as far as AFCON is concerned. Like I told you, there are fixtures coming at 10 p.m. And then tomorrow still at 10 p.m., Botswana will be up against DRC Congo, while Benin will take on Senegal. And then we'll wrap up match day 3 or the final games of the group stages on Wednesday when Equatorial Guinea come up against Algeria. Sudan will take on Burkina Faso, and Gabon will be up against Ivory Coast. Gabon have been quite a disappointment for me in this particular tournament. I did not think that they were bound to lose to Mozambique in the manner in which they did. That was, I think, on match day 2 when they lost by 3 goals to 2. Gabon, very, very decent team. They play some good football. Then, so Mozambique will be up against Cameroon in the late kickoff to wrap up things on Wednesday. And then the tournament will take a break between Thursday and Friday and return on Saturday and Sunday, as well as Monday and Tuesday for the round of 16 fixtures before we head to the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals, respectively, that will be played on the 18th of January, in as far as the competition is concerned, as it does a climax. So, away from that, I do see Moses Israel says hi. Hi, Moses. Good to have you on the broadcast. So, away from the Africa Cup of Nations, let's quickly run to the Premier League, where action does get to match day 19, which means the halfway mark of the season. It's important because that means 50% of the Premier League season games will have been played. It is important because you have a clash between a third place team against a team that is leading the table, whose only point difference is only 3 points. So that's the significance of that game, or of match day 19. You have a game between the second place team on the table, that's Manchester City, on Thursday against one of the surprise packages of the Premier League this season. So it's really, really important going into match day, going into match day 19. So that's the part of the significance of match day 19. But I thought for match day 18, the really, really some positives to take away from Patrick Dogu's also goal that won that game for Manchester United against Newcastle on Friday, to Manchester City leaving it late against Nottingham Forest. That goal from Ryan Cherki that comes in the 83rd minute to become the difference. Tidjane Reinders having scored in the 48th minute, and Omari Hutchinson scoring to restore parity for the home side, and yet when you read when some of the headlines came out, for example, I think it was with Sky Sport who was saying Ryan Cherki stars as Manchester City beat Nottingham Forest, and yet they thought Arsenal struggled to beat Brighton, whereas Brighton had opportunities to come back in that game. They literally no show. Arsenal were largely dominant, but they still suffered from the same pandemic they've been suffering in recent games, that they create so many chances or lots of chances, but they are not clinical in converting those chances. Something that they going to need to iron out when they take on Aston Villa. If they are to win that game, it's a must-win game for Aston Villa. It's a must-win game for both teams, but more importantly, it's a must-win game for the Arsenal. I cannot overemphasize why that is the case, but we'll get to it in just a bit when we get to the actual preview of that game. So match day 18 also offered that 2-1 victory for the Arsenal over Brighton in a very, very dominant performance for the Arsenal, with David Raya making arguably one of the saves of the season. I mean, it was really, really brilliant to watch coming off Yankuba Minte's attempt. So I mean, you're talking about a team in Arsenal who had an XG of 3.0 compared to 0.85 for Brighton. In that first half alone, Arsenal had about 15 attempts on goal. Unfortunately for them, like I said, they're not being clinical enough. Only 6 targets in the overall of the game, sense of the game, because 24 were the actual in total in terms of shots on goal. So compared to Brighton is 8 and 3 on target. So it really, really tells you that what Verbruggen had to deal with in terms of keeping Arsenal at bay in terms of that fixture. So it's only in the second half that Brighton looked a little brighter than they had been in the first half. Then surprise result for me, a bit surprised by the margin of score that Brentford were able to beat up against Bournemouth by 4-1. And of course, Everton is draws, Liverpool getting the better of Wolverhampton Wanderers, who are literally are winless in the last 12 games. And I mean, apparently, according to reports, Wolves are pondering the possibility of sacking Rob Edwards, who they just recently hired from Middlesbrough, to take over the reins from Evita Pereira, who had been shown the exit for a poor run of results. Nothing has changed. he's not won a single game of football for this Wolverhampton Wanderers side, and because nothing has changed, they remain at the bottom of the Premier League standings with yet a single. He's not added them a single point. I think, if anything, maybe the only thing he may have changed is some of their training deals. Otherwise, nothing is changed. Not on the pitch, not how they play, not a single result, not even a draw. That's how horrible it is for Wolves, and not just for Wolves, but Rob Edwards. So does that imply that they made the wrong decision? Possibly, they made the wrong decision in maybe not letting go of Vitor Pereira, but definitely the wrong decision in hiring Rob Edwards. This is a guy that had a team relegated and then literally picked up off the streets to take over the reins at Middlesbrough, where he had rediscovered himself and was doing really, really well. And then he chose to dump them for the Wolves job. I mean, he came into a sinking ship and hoped he would be the miraculous angel that we would save it from sinking. And the boat continued to capsize, Then West Ham, of course, getting beat against Fulham. That's a game they should be winning. They should be getting at least a point. But it's been a poor West Ham literally the entire season. Aston Villa getting the better of Chelsea. It wasn't the prettiest of games for Aston Villa, but somehow they still managed to win. You had a very dominant performance from Chelsea in that first half and in the overall sense of the game. But their attempts on target were not forthcoming as you'd love them to be. And yet Aston Villa used every opportunity going forward to get the better of them. They realized quickly in the first, Supertube, hi, good to have you back on the broadcast. They realized that in the first half, Chelsea were going man to man, and then they took something in the second half, which bettered their fortunes into the game, having Jadon Sancho and who was it else, play wide, and then putting Yuri Tillemans as the 10, which gave them an extra man in behind. Ollie Watkins was among the goal scorers, who was the scorer of the 2 goals that decided to win the game for Aston Villa against Chelsea, for whom Pedro Neto had scored. And then, of course, on Sunday, we saw a 1-1 draw between Sunderland and Leeds. Not too much of a surprise, given that Sunderland are without some of their stars that have gone away to AFCON, and then Crystal Palace getting beat by Tottenham Hotspur, which I think was the second victory in about 9 games. So really, Tottenham very, very poor. So that's the shape of teams that we are talking about. All teams looking to bounce back. Is match day 19 that kind of opportunity for them? Is it that kind of opportunity for them? So you have Burnley taking on Newcastle at 8:30 p.m. at 10:30 p.m. tomorrow. And I mean, for Newcastle, this should be a must-win fixture, whether you're at home, whether you are away from home. They've not been very, very good off the road or on the road in as far as this season is concerned. But, I mean, you've just lost to Manchester United, you lost to Sunderland, you drew away to Chelsea and drew away to Spurs. You've not won in the last 5, really, Newcastle. If there was an opportunity to bounce back, I think there's not going to be a better opportunity than you picking up all 3 points against Burnley, a team that you already beat in the first encounter at St. James's Park by 2 goals to 1. So really, it should be positive. That's only 3 games back, during which, Newcastle still won away to Fulham. During which Burnley lost away to Fulham 3-2. That was at home, and then they lost to Crystal Palace. So they themselves have not done themselves any favors. They equally have 2 draws and 3 losses in the last half. In the last 5, while Newcastle, the only game they've won during the last 5 has been that against Burnley. So apologies on the misrepresentation of the facts of Newcastle's last 5 games. They've only won 1 game. That was a 2-1 against Burnley. So you've already done it before. Just fight and do it again and recover from, that last set of 2 defeats in the last 3 games. Newcastle do have the team to beat up against Burnley, but it is the Premier League. Anything can happen. And we can only wait for it to happen. But if I were to go with, I'm going to go for Newcastle to win this game by 2-1 away from home. That will be my prediction. Then the other game, Pedri says, finally, my favorite YouTuber is back. Good to have you back, Pedri. I hope you've been okay. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas while I was away. So then Black Rose says, where are you from? I'm from Kampala, Uganda. Thanks for asking. Small country in the eastern part of Africa. That's where I'm coming to you live from, and it's about 20 minutes to the top of the hour. That's to the top of the hour of 10 p.m. Pedro says 1-1 against Tanzania. We've already discussed that. So much to my disappointment. Like I said, I did not watch the entirety of the game beyond the highlights that I managed to catch because I was away trying to take a break, hoping that I would get some bit of rest. But unfortunately, my schedule became even tighter than it was before going away on the break. So very, very disappointing and hurting result for me personally, because I know that beating up against Tanzania was our only hope of possibly maybe, just maybe, qualifying as one of the third best placed teams, if we were to beat Tanzania and get all 3 points. But now that that wasn't the case, you really, really feel for the Cranes when they come up against the 3-time champions in Nigeria in their final game. That will be tomorrow at 7 p.m. So I do not know. It was very disappointing. And what made it more disappointing is that we missed a penalty in literally stoppage time. And I do not blame it on the player in Alan Okello for missing a penalty. Players miss penalties, even the biggest of stars, they do miss penalties. But yeah, I can't help it but feel the pain of the result that we could record at the end of the day. So Black Rose says, are you Muslim? No, I'm Christian. How do you feel? I've responded to that. To be fair, Uganda have an awful team. Let's be real. I do not think we have an awful team. I think we've not played well enough. That's for sure. Two, in as far as the entirety of the tournament is concerned, we are one of the underdogs. We have never won the tournament. That's the reality of it. Like I said, our best performances came in 1974 when we reached the semifinals, and then in 1978 when we reached the finals and lost to Ghana. So you can see how many years those have been, ever since we had a good performance at the tournament. When we returned in 2017, we did not leave the group stages. When we came back for the 2019 edition, that's when we made it to the round of 16 and lost to Senegal by 0-0. And then we missed out in the last in the next set of editions. So, we're not very at it indeed. We're not the best of teams in comparison to all the other teams out there. We're not the only team that is at the competition that have never won it, but we do come as underdogs still. To be fair, okay, I've read that. What did you get for Christmas? Oh, for Christmas, I got myself a pair of tires, a pair of 2 tires. I wish I could show them to you, but unfortunately I can't. But I got myself 2 pairs of tires. Really, really a beautiful gift. How about you, Pedro? What did you get? Did somebody get you a Barcelona kit? I'm sure you'd have loved one, or at least for Spain, given how much you love national team football. I do not think you are an underdog. I don't think you are an underdog. Uganda team is a team that everyone laughs at because they are really, really bad. We are very bad in the opening game against Tunisia, particularly those first 10 minutes. We looked lost. We looked horrible. We looked much better in the second half in that game. But yeah, Tunisia were the better team all day long. Like I said, we discussed in the preview of that particular game. I reported to you that we do struggle against North African teams. And so Tunisia is just one of those. And we had not beaten them in the previous 6. So I did not think that was going to be our first opportunity of having a go at it. Against Tanzania, we looked much better. We looked much improved because the difference between us and Tanzania is literally the distance between your mouth and the nose. So that's our only difference. So, like I said, now, when you say we are not an underdog, we're a bad team, then you're literally saying one and the same thing, you got a car. Wow, congratulations to you. Is it an electric car or gasoline? Anyway, whichever it is. What car is it? A Nissan, a BMW, or a Mercedes Benz, an Audi, what, a Kia Sportage, a Ford. What car was it? Is it a Toyota? What car brand is it? We could be here chatting and you got yourself a Lamborghini or a Maserati or a Rolls Royce, Pedro is loaded. But anyways, we'll leave that at that for that discussion. An underdog is a team that can cause an upset and can win against big teams, but isn't one of the main favorites. That's an underdog. I mean, I do not think up until this stage we've seen anything surprising already in as far as the competition is concerned. When we talk about underdogs, maybe the one outlier I would say that Mozambique victory against Gabon, which in itself, again, is not so unique to its nature, to the nature of the competition. So the big boys or the favorite teams have remained to be big, have continued to show that they are favorites. They have the better players, to be fair, to be fair. So you say, you give it's a Tesla, then you say the example you give Croatia in the World Cup, that's an example of an underdog. Uganda isn't. My definition of the underdog is that a team that has no chance. But like you also intimated that it will surprise you and maybe beat one of the big boys. Unfortunately for Uganda, that has not yet happened. That has not yet happened. And I'm not saying it cannot happen or it will not happen because I do not know what the result will be for tomorrow. So if Uganda were to surprise us and beat Nigeria tomorrow, then I think they would fit the shoe. So that's the angle in which I'm looking at it. So until that is done and dusted, but yeah, again, we looked at the dark horses of this tournament, and I did not mention Uganda. As much as I love my country, I did not mention it. Why? Because I know what we are capable of doing. I know when we've been dealt a bad hand, not in the sense of the game of its officiating or anything, but the group in which we came through to play these tournaments. And it's not to say that things will be easier in the next competition, which will be, or the next edition, which will be one of the hosts in 2027. I can only hope that by the time that we are using this as a stepping stone, and as in part the FIFA World Cup qualifiers for 2026, which we did play and were really, really good, that we can use this and that as learning platforms, as stepping stones to better prepare ourselves for when we do host the tournament. Because the last thing you want to have is the tournament host not even making it out of the group stages. We remember how nervous it was for Ivory Coast in the last outing of the competition. So in that sort of sense, Pedri, I hope that sort of represents my views on that really, really well. Anyways, we will not proceed on that topic. We'll leave it at that and proceed with the Premier League as we were, intimating in our submission on the on this Chelsea side. Now, Chelsea do take on FC Bournemouth, who got beat by 4 goals to 1 against Brentford on match day 18. Now, I do not know how to describe Chelsea. Maybe Pedri will perhaps, I imagine, would have a better vocabulary than I do, can get us the right words to define this Chelsea side. When they finished their 1-1 draw against Arsenal, and although this feels like ages ago, it's probably only a month ago, or just slightly over a month ago, we sat here and debated Chelsea being one of the Premier League title contenders. And ever since then, they've played like a team that is playing to qualify for Europa League. That's how they played. That's how I can describe them. When you look at the last 5 games, they've only won 1, beating up against Everton by 2 goals to 0, really drawing against Bournemouth in a goalless draw, drawing to Newcastle in a 2-2 draw, getting beat by Aston Villa, who came from a goal down to beat them by 2-1, and then getting thumped by Leeds United by 3 goals to 1. So when I look at this, Hassan says, welcome. Good to have you, Hassan, on the broadcast. Kindly do me a favor and like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here. So I run short of words on how to describe this Chelsea side. Like I've said before, in terms of their team prowess, in terms of their manager, give him a one game off against any big boys, and he will be able to beat up against them. And keep making reference, like we saw in the finals of the FIFA Club World Cup during the course of the summer. Hassan says, what country are you from? Are you Christian? Yes, I'm Christian, and I come from Kampala, Uganda. Thank you for asking. And Pedro's comment comes just in time. He says, Chelsea is an apples fools team. We got tricked and actually thought they were title contenders. In reality, they are so mid and so average. They play disgusting football. What an awful club, horrendous. I will depart slightly from one of from Pedro's words. I'll depart from the word disgusting football. I think they play good football in some moments, and like we've seen, during this sort of season. Particularly, go to that Aston Villa game, and they played well in that first half. And not in just the first half. Overall, they were the dominant side in that game. They were the dominant side in that game. They were just not clinical. They were not creating enough, in my opinion, based on the sort of snippets of highlights that I've managed to catch. They had a better XG, that's 2.14 compared to Aston Villa's 1.19, a 63% overall ball possession. Now, that's not bad football entirely, but when it came to being clinical in front of goal, they were not that. They were far from that, And we know that the game in itself is a game of fight margins. If you do not take advantage of the small margins, you're bound to lose it. Hassan says, I'm Casta from Germany. Good to have you, Casta. Hello. Pedri goes on there to write some Germany, which I'm not very familiar with, really. So, which I'm not very familiar with. But yeah, really, it's all good. It's all good. Oh, really? I thought I'd done that. Just give me a second, guys. I thought I'd done that. Somebody is requesting me for something here. Okay. So, okay. So, okay, you spoke your German there. This is what happens to a team that beats Barcelona. That's what you get, Chelsea. You laugh at Chelsea. Not the first time you're making the submission. In regards to reminding us of what happens to teams that beat Barcelona, that they go on to have sort of bad spells. And I can only hope that there are some outliers in there. You said congratulations on hitting 300,000 followers. That's a wrong submission or a wrong statistic that you're giving. I do not know whether, and I don't know if it's a typo on your part or you meant it for what it is, but that's not the case particularly, unless a miracle happened. Okay, I'm done with that. I needed to respond to somebody. Oh, yes, it's 3,000. And yeah, thank you for that. So, Chelsea do come up against a Bournemouth side that have forgotten how to win, that do not know how it feels to win. I, for one, I do not remember the last time I watched a live game highlights or even read on this broadcast the last time Bournemouth won a game of football. I stand to be corrected, but I think we ought to go back to possibly around October, to find a Bournemouth, win. To find, a Bournemouth win. So it's been that horrible for them in as far as their performances are concerned. You say I can see a 0-0 Chelsea draw and Bournemouth. So, but quickly, just to have a recap of what those Bournemouth results have been. And you have to go back to October 26th, where they beat up against Nottingham Forest by 2-0. Since then, they lost to Manchester City by 3-1, lost to Aston Villa by 4-0, drew against West Ham in a 2-2 draw, having to come from 2 goals down, went away and lost to Sunderland in a 3-2 defeat, lost to Everton in a 1-0 defeat, shared the spoils with Chelsea in a goalless draw at the Vitality Stadium, were involved in a 4-4 draw against Manchester United, a 1-1 draw against Burnley, and recently a 4-1 defeat at the hands of Brentford. Now, they come up against Chelsea tomorrow and play at home against Arsenal on Saturday, which isn't any easier fixture. As we come into this particular game, rumors continue to rally up that Manchester City have already reached an agreement on personal terms with their winger, Anton Semenyo. And according to Sky Sports, Manchester City have reached out to Bournemouth to understand the details or the nitty-gritties of what it would take to sign the 65 million release clause rated Ghanaian winger. It's club uncertainty in Bournemouth. First, Semenyo rumors of leaving, loss of key players in the summer, Evanescent contact injury, impacts goals, Kluivert drop off, Alex Gimenez, very risky. Personally, I see Semenyo as a very average player. To be honest, I think my opinion about him has sort of gone through a swerving curve. In other words, it's not been straight. Last season, in a certain phase of it, I was convinced he was one of the best wingers there was in the Premier League. And his numbers will speak to that effect. This season particularly, I think in about the opening 6 or 7, 8 games, he had about 6 goals already to his name. Ever since then, he's only scored 2 in addition to that 6 to take him to a tally of I think 8 now. So whereas that number, he has scored 3 since then, to take him to a tally of 9, which is particularly not different with Igor Thiago, who has taken a huge long spell without scoring. But if you are to be in one of the best or rated among the best, consistency is a huge key. And I do not think that he's offered that. Players like Hugo Ekitike, players like Dominic Calvert-Lewin have been scoring goals and catching up with him really, really soon, as well as the likes of Morgan Rogers, as we will see. So, no, really. So, I mean, when you say you do not rate him or you look at him as an average player, I do not disagree with you. He is an improvement of the player that came from Bristol City in January 2023 to the player that we are seeing today. He's an improvement of that. Now, of course, if he is to leave Bournemouth, his aspiration is to go to a bigger team. And Manchester City, if media reports are anything to go by, is that team for him. Now, it's a huge gamble to go to Manchester City on his part. Why? Because he's not going to be guaranteed playing time, as has been the case at Bournemouth. The perfect example we can use is look at Eberechi Eze at Arsenal. Whereas Eze's form recently has been in part a justification of his lack of minutes. I do not think we can say the same for Enoni Madueke, because he came off a very brilliant performance against Club Brugge and only featured in Arsenal's penalty victory against Crystal Palace at the quarterfinals of the EFL Cup. That speaks to the kind of quality you need to display when you go to a bigger team, or the level of consistency, not just on the turf, but also in training. I'm not convinced that he has that cut yet. Look at a player like Omar Mamouche. Last season, when he came in January, he was the star of that team, literally. I think he scored about 7 goals in 11 fixtures for Manchester City, or slightly more than 11. He was one of the stars of the team going into the tail end of the season. That was Omar Mamouche. This season, we're barely speaking his name. Right now, he's away at AFCON with the Egyptian national team, but we're barely mentioning his name this season. Why? Because Brad Erling Haaland has been carrying that team on his shoulders. Ryan Cherki has been quite the revelation. He leads the tally of assists with 7, tied with Bruno Fernandes, who has equally 7. Granit Xhaka and Mohamed Kudus come respectively with 5 each there. Now, and then Tidjane Reinders has been the other key performer in that Manchester City team, not to mention the resurrection of Phil Foden and the brilliant performances of Jeremy Doku in as far as this season is concerned. So when you look at those facts, trust me, when he gets signed to Manchester City, they will give him playing time. But it to be guaranteed, as the case is at Bournemouth, I think that will be a huge myth, or he will be lying to himself if he does expect that. And it's not going to be entirely on him, because we've also seen it that in Pep Guardiola's rotational mindset or capabilities as a manager, as a very brilliant manager, the best there is, when it comes to man management and everything that falls within management of a team, it's very possible that even when you're in form, he's going to bench you for the next game. Why? Because he has a bigger vision for you, or for the season at large, or for the wider team. So he must bear in mind what he's going himself into. And for a team like Manchester City, who are competing for titles, if you do not click instantly, I do not think the patience, the time for ultimate patience is there for you. It's usually never there. It has to come over time. Look at Jeremy Doku. It's taken him a bit of time to get to the level he is at this season, particularly. Look at a player like Calvin Phillips. He went there and did not work out. Look at a player like Nico Gonzalez. In the summer, having signed him in January, he was one of the players that rumors circulated that he was being pondered about being sold. Had it not been for the injury setbacks of Rodri, maybe we would not gotten to see the best of Nico Gonzalez in a Manchester City shirt, as we've come to see in recent, games. So that's, a huge possibility. City gets Semenyo, it will be a replication of Grealish's story, playing for a struggling Villa side at the time, and he moved to City. This is happening to Semenyo now. Can't dribble much like Grealish. Meanwhile, speaking of Grealish thinks he's okay, maybe it's just an opinion, and I'm not trying to cascade for him on that. He said Saka is not a skillful player, something in that region, that he can't dribble well. And he's right. Saka is not like Lamine Yamal in the style of play. He's not like a Ryan Cherki in style of play. He's not like an Alexander Hileb in style of play. He's not like an Eden Hazard, in style of play. So, but he himself, who thinks he is that, he's not that as well, really. So I understand when you draw the comparisons. And I remember for Jack Grealish, it's only the 2022-2023 Premier League season that he sort of starred in a Manchester City jersey. Other than that, the only thing we remember about him in a Manchester City shirt was his price tag of £100 million. Pedri goes on to say he's going to become just another player at City. They don't need him. They have so many players in his position, which is already happening right now in Manchester City. He needs to go to a team that needs him. Well, you would have thought that, or he would have thought that, but obviously he has other ideas. If you had to ask me, I think Manchester City need a right back more than they need a player like Antoine Semenyo. I do not think they struggle from creating chances. I do not think they struggle from scoring enough goals. No, none of that is true. In any case, they've scored the most number of goals in the Premier League this season, 10 more than the team that comes second to them, which is Arsenal, who have only scored 33. And of course, Man United have scored 32. You have a Liverpool and Chelsea in there who have scored 30. So clearly, I do not think Manchester City are struggling from the kind of problems that a player like Semenyo would seek to, solve. But maybe for them, it's a longer term objective. Jesus, JY8 says, did you sell that car? I don't know which car. I don't know if the question is meant for me or for Pedri. But Jesus says hi. Okay, Pedri says, I agree with Grealish. Saka can't dribble, but brother, who are you to speak Grealish? You can't dribble to save your life. Exactly. Even he, Grealish, can't dribble really. He will dribble past a player, one or two, and in the rarest of occasions. But if it comes to dribbling skills, I do not think he's any mile away from what Saka does. Basically what Saka does is, one, he uses his physique and trying to, and cutting back into spaces to either make the cross or have an attempt on goal, which works for him. Why would you? And then the other thing, like I maybe to do a bit of comparison for Lamine Yamal, I remember us having this kind of conversation, and particularly it was about Lamine Yamal. And I said, when players grow to a certain age, and I remember making reference to Cristiano Ronaldo when he had just joined Manchester United, and then the player he went on to progress to be. There comes a point for a player, and I think Saka has first approached that sort of level, that it's no longer about dribbling, and be feeling satisfied that you dribbled past, this player and that player, it's no longer about that. What it is about, as you mature, it's about the results. It's about the team, not your individual happiness of, I dribbled past 3 players. And, today I was killing them. I was killing it down there with all those dribbles. For a player like Bukayo Saka, it's now about goals and assists. It's about the team winning. It's about 3 points on board, Whereas for a player who is as young as Lamine Yamal, whereas winning as a team is important, that sort of individual brilliance is still important to him to shine, Every player that is good wants to shine. Do not get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. And that's why players, especially forward players, are innately selfish in front of goal. So that remains as a fact. But when it comes to the finest of margins, Lamine Yamal still gets the pleasure in, cutting through players like a hot knife through butter, So, and yet for Bukayo Saka, that's no longer the sort of stage. And if we're being fair, Jack Grealish shouldn't be of that mindset. But overall, in the whole aspect of the game, meanwhile, those games between Mali and Comoros, and well as Zambia and Morocco have kicked off. So, meanwhile, when you look at when you look at the overall aspect of the game, how many players are really, really good at dribbling that out there? A player, you say, let's say the Alexander Hileb of this world, the Eden Hazard of this world, the Ronaldinhos of this world. Who is that player? Because even Ryan Cherki, I do not think he's hit that bar yet. Who is that one player that you're going to say in the modern game today, that's the best dribbler that we've seen? Forget players that, dodge past one player, then, or, literally pass themselves into space and make the run for it, which majority of wingers do. That one player that excites you, knowing that every time he gets the ball, he's going to embarrass somebody. Of course, when you take it to the Maradonas, you're going far back. The Nazario Darimas, the Peles of this world, those Brazilians, the Juninhos, players like Kaká, that did it. I mean, of course, I do not have the full list on my fingertips, but the point I'm trying to drive is that in the modern game today, you're having less of that. And part of it is the way players are coached these days. Because I feel that players are being overcoached into systems and structures. So their individual natural brilliance is not being accommodated the space to thrive the way it used to be. And it's not to say that the game is more about results now than it was yesterday, but because of the monetization of the game, the increased monetization, meanwhile, Morocco have a lead against Zambia. Because of the continuous monetization of football, it's become more, results have become more important because of the cost implications involved in it or the profit implications on it than it was yesterday. You know, and you remember a manager like Jose Mourinho, he wasn't the kind of manager that wanted players with, the kind of fancy feet. He wanted players that get the job done, I mean, how many are we longing to see another Lionel Messi? I mean, we've seen comparisons being drawn. Doku can dribble past. I mean, but how often is he doing it? How consistently is he doing it well enough? He is doing it. That's right. But would you put him in the same bracket as Messi? Forget the effectiveness in front of goal in providing assists and scoring the goals. But in terms of entertaining you when he comes face to face, when he comes one to one with a player, would he be that for you? So okay, Pedri and Jesus there have switched to some bit of Spanish there, but I see all the comments, but I wanted to revert back. Jesus saying a Toyota Wish. Jesus, do you want to donate to me a Toyota Wish? I wouldn't mind if it were 2014 or Jesus Christ. Anyway, in Uganda, you're not allowed to bring a car that is 8 years older than its date of manufacture. So maybe a 2016 one. Is it 8 years or 10 years? Somewhere in there. But yeah, unless you're willing to offer me one. So back to the Chelsea game against Bournemouth. So literally, Bournemouth have not won a game since October the 26th when they beat up against Nottingham Forest. Chelsea have struggled. Their only win in the last 5 came against Everton in a 2-0 victory. So they too do not have the consistency to be relied upon to say, yeah, they're going to get a win for you tomorrow. But Chelsea being at home gives them that slight advantage. But Bournemouth will also come knowing that, yeah, we were able to hold them in the first leg. Maybe we can do it. We saw Aston Villa come from behind. Maybe we can do it. We saw that 2-2 draw against Newcastle. Maybe we can do it. But I don't know. Part of me wants to give Chelsea a chance in this game, that they can win it by 2-1. Nobody would have assumed that Chelsea would be 10 points adrift of Aston Villa, yet we're saying they were title contenders after that 1-1 draw against Arsenal. So it speaks to how fast things have changed, in recent times. Who would have assumed that Chelsea, a title contender, would be on level on points with Manchester United, who were all saying were horrendous? Meanwhile, speaking of Manchester United, anyway, we'll get to them. We'll get to them in a bit. So, but yeah, that's how unconvincing Chelsea have been. But I'm going to go 2-1 Chelsea. I'm going to go with my gut instincts here, and I give Chelsea the victory. That game coming at 10:30 p.m. tomorrow. Hopefully, we will be here to either do a watch along or broadcast. I'm hoping I can do the broadcasts at around 9 before the kickoff of the AFCON, so that then we can all go and watch those games starting at 10:30 and at 10 and everything to do with that. I thought you were selling a Toyota Wish. No, I do not own a Toyota Wish. I've never owned one. I've driven one, but I do not own one. Pedro is the one that said he got a car for a Christmas gift. I mean, how nice must it feel to be in Pedro's shoes? He got a Tesla. Those I'm hoping for as long as it's not a Cybertruck. By the way, I'm of the view that the Cybertruck is one of the ugliest cars ever made, in my opinion. One of the ugliest cars I've ever seen. Overly overrated. I've seen it in Uganda somewhere. And do you like Teslas or Dodge Hellcat? To be honest, I have zero familiarity with any of the cars. I've never had an admiration for them because I do not know enough about them, particularly maybe why. That's why. But one of my favorite cars is a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. That's one of my favorite cars. It's one of those cars that, I'd fancy. How is Angel Gabriel? So then a Toyota Fortuner. Those are some of my favorite cars. A Pajero Sport, Mitsubishi. Those are some of my favorite cars. Really, really good cars. Particularly the last two for off-road experience, on and off-road experience, very good. The G-Wagon, that's just like trim, Pedro says, I have 5 cars. Wow. Okay. Are you a car collector? For some people, it's less about them having money and more about an obsession with something. It's just something they love. And they end up being collectors of that. So some people are car collectors. The same way some people are watch collectors. The same way people love bikes or anything like that. So are you, which one are you, Petri? Are you a car collector or you just love fancy cars and stuff like that? Tesla, BMW, Honda, Lambo, G-Wagon. BMW. Okay, good. So, anyways, to proceed, Nottingham Forest will be up against Everton at 10:30 p.m. Nottingham Forest have equally had a slump in form in as far as Sean Dyche is concerned. They've lost to Manchester City over the weekend. They lost away at Fulham. Of course, they beat up against Spurs quite incredibly well. They lost away to Everton. They beat up against Wolves expectedly, so they only have 2 victories in the last 5. In comparison, Everton have not done themselves much favors recently, but they were not so bad off. They've only won 2 in the last 5 against Bournemouth, against Nottingham Forest, losing to Chelsea and Arsenal, and drawing to Burnley. My gut feeling is that this could end in a 1-1 draw between the two sides, but Nottingham Forest need this game the most of the two teams because of where they are on the Premier League log, because they only 5 points above relegation. That's the only favor they've had, Nottingham Forest, is that the team trying to chase them in West Ham have not been winning any games. So that's what keeps them very comfortable in the kind of position they are in. Jesus says, I have a Geek MG 63. Sorry, he says, I have a GLC MG 63. Oh, I think I need to Google that one for me to particularly understand what car it is exactly. But yeah, so anyways, quickly to proceed further, West Ham will be up against Brighton, at home against Brighton. Again, as much as I would want West Ham to win this game, they've not done anything to tell us that they are capable of winning games. In recent times, they had a moment where they had a little good spell, but the last 5 games, they've only managed to pick 2 points. They've lost, that's 2 draws, 1-1 draw against Man United and against Brighton, and losing to Aston Villa, Manchester City and Fulham. Brighton themselves have lost 3 out of the last 5 and only drew 2. So again, form is the same. Nothing much separates between the two sides other than their positions on the Premier League log. So I think West Ham could fight for a draw in this one. I won't be surprised with the 1-1 draw between the two sides. And then Manchester United at a past 11 p.m. will take on Wolverhampton Wanderers. This is a team that they beat by 4-1 in the first leg. Wolves opened themselves a lot and they got hammered. I do not think they will repeat the same mistakes of opening themselves that much. However, I think they will still get beat. Manchester United do not have the missing Amadou Diallo, who has scored 2 goals for Ivory Coast already. They are without Brani Bomo. They are without Nusa Mazoroi, some of their 3 best players, arguably this season. They are away to the Africa Cup of Nations. So really, when you look at it in that perspective, you'd think it would have an impact on a result that like that of Manchester United. But knowing that they have beaten up against Newcastle recently, even though it was a narrow victory, I do not think Wolves is a team you want to lose to. Besides, if you're Manchester United, the position you're in on the Premier League table, 6th with 29 points, should be enticing, knowing that if you do win, you go to the equivalent of points with Liverpool, who, even if they were to win their game on Thursday against Leeds United, you know that very soon they will be playing Arsenal, and they could drop points or whichever may happen, and you sort of catch up not just on Liverpool but on all those above you. So there's a huge opportunity for them. Jesus says, drink water, mate. Do videos with other Ugandan football YouTubers. I've reached out to a couple. Some chickened out of conversations. Others promised and did not come through. So, and then when it comes to Ugandan football YouTubers, they're not that many. Most of them are media personalities already. People who work on radio, people who work on TV, who I wouldn't say play hard to get, but are not really easily accessible. That's what I would say. So it's not like I do not want to do it. It's just that I've not gotten the opportunity to do it. I've just not gotten that opportunity. But it's one that I keep exploring behind the scenes. And if something good ever comes out of it, then you'll be the first to, to find out. But thank you for that suggestion, Jesus. Thank you for that suggestion. So, Man United against Wolverhampton Wanderers, I'm going to go with the Manchester United 2-0 victory. Man United have only kept 2 clean sheets this season, against Newcastle on Friday and against Sunderland. Will they be able to keep a clean sheet? Even in the 4-1 victory, they never managed to keep one. So, but United are in good shape. 3 victories out of the last 5 is not bad. So I think they're bound to get a result here. I'll go 2-0 for Manchester United. Anyways, away from that, the biggest game of the night will come at 11:15 p.m. when Arsenal play Aston Villa. Boubacar Kamara and Matty Cash will be out of the tie for Aston Villa. So expect either Lucas Digne or Ian Maatsen to play at right back. We know for a fact that Matty Cash is going to be a miss through suspension, having accumulated. Both players will miss the game against Arsenal after picking up their 5th yellow cards of the Premier League at Chelsea. So they get to be suspended the same way you had. What's his name? Ricardo Carafiori missed Arsenal's game against Wolverhampton Wanderers through suspension. So it's basically that. I think, in as far as the first half of the season, this is bound to be Arsenal's biggest game of the first half of the season. Why? Because it's against Aston Villa, one of the only 2 teams that have beaten them already in the 18 games they've played. One of the team that saw them miss out on the 2023-2024 Premier League title when they beat them by 2-0 at the Emirates Stadium. Leon Bailey and Ollie Watkins, the goal scorers. The team that knows how to beat Arsenal or have known to beat up against Arsenal in recent times against their former manager in Unai Emery, who many think that if he had been given more time and perhaps given the financial backing that Arteta has received, which has happened over the years, maybe he would have been a more successful manager, even miles compared to Mikel Arteta. That in itself is a subjective decision by its own nature, but those are the first statements of fact. Regardless of how they won Aston Villa, the fact will remain that they won with that late winner through Emi Buendia. 2, can Arsenal find a solution on how to beat Aston Villa, a team that beat them in the first leg? I say this because there are 3 games in the Premier League before meeting Portsmouth in the FA Cup are going to be the most important games in a fortnight. Why? Because they play against Aston Villa, they have Bournemouth, and then they play Liverpool. So, when you look at it in that context, 1, a victory against Aston Villa is a make or break tie for them because we're talking about a team that is third of the Premier League table. Only 3 points adrift of Arsenal while at the summit of the standings. 2, if they draw or drop points, that means there will be only 3 points ahead of Manchester City, who play away to Sunderland for match day 19. In other words, if Manchester City win, they could easily leapfrog Arsenal and move to the summit of the table because they have a superior goal difference. Then, if they do lose, they will still find themselves, if in a similar spot, if Manchester City can beat up against Sunderland away from home. And we know that Man City beat up against Sunderland quite comfortably in the first leg by 3-0 at the Etihad Stadium. The kinds of fixtures we have this weekend are the replica of fixtures we had on match day 15 of the Premier League. So the results from that weekend should remind you or should put you in perspective for what your expectations should be. Meanwhile, Brahim Diaz has scored for Morocco to make it 2-0 against Zambia, and Morocco flying high out there. I do not know what the result is currently, but let me find out what the result is for Comoros. And Mali is still goalless. Meanwhile, tonight there's a game in the Italian Serie A between AC Roma and Genoa at 10:45 p.m. So do not miss out on that action for those of you that are interested in that action as well. So that's the significance of this game. So, in other words, Arsenal have a revenge plot to take to Aston Villa. Arsenal have been really, really good at home this season. I think in the Premier League, they've only dropped 2 points at home this season, and that was in the draw against Manchester City, the 1-1 draw. 2, they come up against the most on-form team in the Premier League. They've won 8 consecutive games. 8 consecutive games in the Premier League. Then, the second informed team is Manchester City, who have won 6 games in a row. Arsenal just rediscovering their own form following that defeat to Aston Villa. And they've won their last 3. So they are building onto that. They tried to build onto that. So it's really, really going to be important for them. But like I said, the next 3 games are really all important for this Arsenal side against Villa, Bournemouth, and Liverpool. But it all starts tomorrow against Villa. So it always feels for Unai Emery that he has a score to settle when he comes up against Arsenal. And you all remember that game for the 2022-2023 season when Arsenal went away and beat up against Villa by 4-2 at Villa Park. Last season, they went to Villa Park and won by 2-0. This time around, they got beat. You know, in that first game between the two sides, we saw that Villa were marginally the better side. So, in as far as the last 5 meetings are concerned, you know, this is very concerning. Arsenal have only won 1. And that was last season in a 2-0 victory at Villa Park. The reverse fixture was a 2-2 draw. Then 2. This season, like I've said, they've already lost the same side. Last season, but 1, Aston Villa beat Arsenal home and away. I think by 0-0, I'm trying to remember what the other scoreline was. But the other key fact that I want us to remember is that Arsenal have struggled against the top 6 this season. Against Aston Villa, they got beat. Against Manchester City, it was a 1-1 draw. Against Liverpool, it was a defeat by 0-0. Against Chelsea, it was a 1-1 draw. Now, Manchester United are in the top 6 currently. It's the only game that they won this season. When Sunderland were in the top 6, they still did not win that game. It was a 2-2 draw. So, in other words, the 3 draws they've had this season have come up against Man City, Chelsea, and Sunderland. And the 2 losses they've had this season have come up against Liverpool and Aston Villa. At the time of those results, all those teams were within the top 6. That is very scary, or a very, very scary statistic. You know, not just for you, but you fear for this Arsenal side. Arsenal played brilliantly well. And whereas Aston Villa have been winning games, some of their last couple of games have not been very, very convincing. Jesus says, I hope City win the league. That's his hope. So, whereas Villa have been winning games, they're not particularly very convincing in their 4-3 win against Brighton, but they won, which is the thing that you want. Against West Ham, they were less convincing. They had to come from 2-0 down, but it was still a win. Against Manchester United, it wasn't the kind of dominant performance that you would have hoped for, but they still won. I went to Chelsea, same story, but they still won. So the question is, who is going to put a stop to those wanting performances that are still winning games? Is it going to be Arsenal? A part of me is not convinced. Why? Because the fixture does come at a time when Villa are in so much confidence. It's not to say that Arsenal are struggling for confidence, because at home, they've done really, really well. But it's not like Aston Villa have been struggling away from home. Whether they're at home or they're away from home, they've been doing really, really well. So then, it begs the question, Arsenal, with their injury concerns to Jurriën Timber, to Ricardo Carafiori, who felt something during the warm-up for the game against Brighton. Jurriën Timber suffered, he said, I think it was he landed wrongly in training and those kinds of things. Oh, meanwhile, this is some breaking news. According to Ben Jacobs, he's saying Bournemouth expecting Antoine Semenyo's move to Manchester City to be formalized within the next 48 hours. It follows positive talks on Monday over the structure of payment relating to Semenyo's release clause. Semenyo has already verbally agreed personal terms with Manchester City. As it stands, Bournemouth still hoping Semenyo can make a farewell appearance against Chelsea on Tuesday night. You know, I need somebody to school me on the rules, because from my understanding is that the transfer window doesn't open until the 1st. Anyway, maybe the thing is that you wouldn't want to risk a player to get injured in a game for you to possibly squander a transfer that is bound to generate you lots of money, you know, because that's a huge amount of money that Bournemouth cannot, you know, forego, as much as they need a player of Antoine Semenyo, you know. So, meanwhile, when it comes to other players that Aston Villa will miss in their trip away to the Emirates, Ross Barkley, Pau Torres, and Tyrone Mings remain sidelined with injuries, plus the other two who suspended. That's Matty Cash and Boubacar Kamara, and then Ivan Guessand is away for the AFCON. Whereas that lightens this Aston Villa side. Like I said, the recent results for Aston Villa are very, very encouraging going away to the Emirates Stadium in terms of facing Arsenal. They're very, very encouraging. So Arsenal themselves have questions over the availability of some players, just as much as Aston Villa have. Who has it the worst at the moment? When it comes to injuries, I think it's safe to say that possibly Aston Villa have it the wrong side, you know, when it comes to injuries. But Arsenal have had their fair share. We know that Kai Havertz has been back in training. Don't know whether he will make the bench, you know. Christian Mosquera, Max Dorman, Ben White, you know, Carafiori with the muscular issue, and Jurgen Timber. Are they going to be available? We can only wait and see, you know. But yeah, so meanwhile, it's starting to rain out there. Typical of a Ugandan climate. It's been threatening to rain almost all day. Been a bit of a cloudy environment with, you know, low sunshine. So, but anyways, back to the conversation. So, even with the injuries that Arsenal do have, I think arguably they still have a very, very strong team to make their case in as far as that fixture is concerned. But like, then you also have a former Arsenal player in Emi Martinez. In Emi Martinez, you have a former Arsenal player who literally has a bone to pick with his former bosses. Not in a bad way, but it's like he has a point to prove, you know? It's like he did. I mean, it's not like he left on bad terms, really, but makes it feel like there's a bone to pick there. But anyways, how do Arsenal set up? For example, against Brighton, we saw that they played Declan Rice at right back. You know, that's how they set up their team. Then they played Mikel Merino in midfield. Now, whereas Mikel Merino is good, I do not think he offers them enough defensively when it comes to his midfield duties. So, should it be the case? And then we saw Pierre Hincapié alongside William Saliba and Maslow Skedi to left back. Should it be such the case that, let's say, they are without Carafiori and Timber? The other advantage is that we saw Gabriel Magalhaes return to the fold of this team. That was really, really positive. I do not know if he will be fit enough to start this game. And the question, would you risk to start him in this game? God knows Arsenal need him. They need him back as soon as yesterday. But the question is, aren't you better off, just affording him maybe a couple of minutes in this game and then maybe starting him in the game against Bournemouth and as a build-up to perhaps for the game against Liverpool, that sort of gradual re-inclusion? That's for Mikel Arteta to decide. I do not think Maz Lewis Kelly would be so bad at left back, but I would say he would be a bit of a risk, a bit of a vulnerability to think about. Given how Aston Villa could look to personally target him, because they will be looking for weaknesses. And then also in that midfield, if you're Aston Villa, you're going to look to isolate either Zubimendi or Mikel Merino to get the advantage. So whatever the decision Mikel Arteta makes, I think he will need Declan Rice to be back in midfield. And if need be, then you'd rather Christian Nogard be played as your right back, in my opinion, if push comes to shove. If the team, and then you plug out Mikel Merino, and then the front three remain the same in Trossard, Gyökeres, and Bukayo Saka. Of course, Gyökeres is still fighting to get his form back. So that would be my expectation for the Arsenal's sort of setup. But I'm not sure it's time to risk Gabriel Magalhaes. For Aston Villa, Matika should be absent, so expect who to play there. Lindelof to be in that team, Ezri Konsa, Martinez, Yuri Tielemans alongside Amadou Onana, Lucas Digne. Yes, expect Lucas Digne. Amadou Onana in that midfield. Expect Ollie Watkins to start, Morgan Rogers and Daniel Malen in that team. John McGinn, Emi Buendia. I do not think Emi Buendia may start. I think it will be a midfield trio of Amadou Onana, Yuri Tielemans, and John McGinn. And then you'll have Morgan Rogers, Ollie Watkins, and Daniel Malen or Emi Buendia, maybe, or Jordan Sancho to start. Expect one of those decisions. I do not know. Arsenal have struggled to keep a clean sheet in recent times. They've only done it against Everton in recent times in that 1-0 victory. So I'm not really, really positive when it comes to them keeping a clean sheet. So that's why my prediction for this particular game will go to Stilton. But yeah, they've only kept 2 clean sheets in the last 5. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw as my prediction. Still a bit undecided, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Arsenal register their 4th draw of the season. It's not good enough for a title contender, for a team that wants to win titles, but that's the expectation I have. A 2-2 draw. Let me know if you have, divergent views on that one. Then on Thursday, our action will continue. That's the 1st of January 2026. Crystal Palace against Fulham at 8:30 p.m., as well as Liverpool against Leeds at the same kickoff time. And then at 11 p.m., Brentford will be at home against Tottenham Hotspur, while Manchester City will play away to a weekend Sunderland, who seldom lose at home. I've not known them to lose a single game at home this season. Will this be their first? My guess is that it will be their first loss at home this season. They're missing a good chunk of players who are going away for AFCON. It doesn't help Regis Libris in their attempts of keeping that. Manchester City, like Pep Guardiola, have turned the corner. Pep Guardiola said they feel they've turned the corner. And for a manager of his experience in terms of pushing for a Premier League title or for a league title, surely he knows and he feels it in him that they can't go on a good run of as many as perhaps even 10 games with winning. Their upcoming games won't be any easy, but because they face Sunderland, who they can comfortably beat, even though it won't be an easy game, they'll face Chelsea, who they can beat. Chelsea, like I said, are really poor at the moment. Brighton at home, that will be a comfortable win, even though they lost the first leg. Then they will be up against Manchester United away. That will be a bit of a difficult game. 17th Jan, and Wolves. That's a winnable fixture for Pep Guardiola. So their next 5 fixtures are not easy, yes, when you have Chelsea and Man United in the same bracket, but Sunderland, Brighton, Wolves, for a title contender, should be a winnable fixture. Welcome to the bench, Semenyo. That's a warning, Anton Semenyo, going to Manchester City, you know. So anyway, guys, that's it for me. In as far as that is concerned, we'll digest those Thursday fixtures at the right opportunity. But yeah, thank you so much for being part of today's broadcast. Thank you so much, Pedri. Thank you so much, Jesus. Thank you so much, what's his name? Hassan, for being part, Black Rose, and every single one of you that was part of tonight's broadcast. I wish you a blessed night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye. Do not miss our action tomorrow morning. We'll be back to discuss the latest. Happy New Year to you, to Jesus. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.